I don't know why I agreed to house sit for my friend Jason. Maybe it was the extra cash, or maybe I just didn't believe the rumors. Either way, I found myself standing in front of the Sally house, gripping the keys with sweaty hands. Jason had inherited the house from a distant relative and was in the process of fixing it up to sell. He wasn't from Atchison, so he didn't grow up hearing the stories. But I had. A house that screams. A house that attacks. A house with a name, which is never a good sign. I wasn't planning to stay long, just 3 nights to keep an eye on the place while Jason was out of town. Easy money, right? The first night was unsettling, but manageable. The house was old, creaky, and full of that heavy silence that makes you feel like you're not alone. I sat up in the living room with my sleeping bag, not about to sleep upstairs where the worst of the stories came from. I heard the occasional thump from the second floor, but I told myself it was just the house settling. Then the second night came. I was brushing my teeth in the downstairs bathroom when I heard it. A soft giggle, like a little girl laughing. My stomach dropped. I turned off the faucet and listened. Silence. I stepped out into the hall, scanning the darkened house. A floorboard creaked upstairs. My breath caught in my throat. There was supposed to be no one here. I grabbed my flashlight and slowly made my way up the staircase, each step feeling heavier than the last. The hallway was lined with empty rooms, the doors slightly ajar. I hesitated before pushing open the door to what I knew was the nursery. My flashlight beam swept over the room. It was mostly empty except for an old wooden rocking chair, and it was moving. Just a slow, steady back and forth. I froze, my pulse pounding in my ears. Then, suddenly, the chair stopped. I backed away, nearly tripping over my own feet, and that's when I saw it. A small handprint smeared on the dusty floor. Fresh. I bolted down the stairs, my only thought being to get out of the house. But as I reached the front door, something slammed it shut. Hard. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. I fumbled with the lock, yanking at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Then the screaming started. A blood-curdling, ear-piercing scream, so loud it rattled the windows. I stumbled backward, covering my ears, and then I felt it. A burning pain across my back, like something had clawed me. I gasped and turned, but there was nothing there. Then, all at once, the screaming stopped. The house went silent. Too silent. I turned back to the door, and this time it opened with ease. I didn't hesitate. I ran. I spent the rest of the night in my car, parked across the street, watching the house. Around 3 a.m., I saw movement in one of the upstairs windows. A shadow. Small. Like a child. That was enough for me. I texted Jason the next morning and told him I wasn't going back inside. He was annoyed, but when I sent him a photo of the scratches on my back, he stopped arguing. A few weeks later, Jason finally admitted something to me. He had been waking up with scratches too. But what really shook me was what he said next. Jason told me he had set up a camera in the hallway before he left, just to see if anything weird would happen. He never told me about it because he didn't want to freak me out. He sent me the footage. At first, it showed nothing but an empty, dark hallway. Hours passed. Then, around the same time I had heard the laughter, a door opened by itself. Not swung open, just a slow, steady creak. Then, a shadow moved across the frame. Small, childlike, and unnervingly fast. And the worst part, it stopped, right in front of the camera. It stayed there, unmoving, for almost a minute. And then, in the darkness, 2 white eyes opened. I threw my phone across the room. Jason still owns the house. He still insists on selling it. But I don't think I'll ever set foot in that place again. I worked the night shift at the old Crescent Casino. The place had been shut down for years, a once thriving hotspot in the Nevada desert, now just a hollowed-out shell. The owners had gone bankrupt, and the building was set for demolition in a few months. Until then, a private security company had been hired to keep an eye on it, mainly to stop squatters or vandals. That's where I came in. Jake Thornton, overnight security. Easy money, I thought. Sit in a booth, drink some coffee, walk around a few times, and collect a paycheck. But I wasn't the only one in there. The first night was uneventful, mostly. The casino was completely untouched, frozen in time. Slot machines covered in dust, poker tables still set with cards, and old posters advertising events that would never happen. I did my rounds at midnight, weaving between rows of silent slot machines. Their dead screens reflected my flashlight, making the whole place feel even more eerie. But then, as I passed the High Rollers Lounge, I heard it. A faint chime. I stopped. It was distant but distinct. A slot machine. I shined my light around. Nothing. The place was empty. I shook it off. Maybe the wind outside had rattled something. Maybe I was just imagining things. But as I turned to leave, the sound of coins spilling into a tray. I spun around, my flashlight shaking, but every machine in the room was off. I walked over to the machine closest to me and tapped the screen. Dead. The power to the entire casino had been cut long ago. I should have left then. By the time my second shift started, I had convinced myself I was just jumpy. Casinos were designed to feel alive, even when empty. The flashing lights, the carpets, the stale scent of cigarette smoke still lingering in the air. It all played tricks on the brain. I did my usual rounds, moving past the silent poker tables and the empty bar. But this time, I noticed something. A chair was pulled out at one of the blackjack tables. I was sure it hadn't been like that the night before. I walked over and slid it back in, my hands shaking slightly. Then I saw it. A stack of poker chips sitting neatly in front of an empty seat. I felt my stomach tighten. I hadn't seen those chips before. A cold breeze moved through the casino, but the doors were locked. I backed away, but before I could leave, "Hit me," a whisper, right behind me. I spun around, heart pounding. No one was there. I pulled out my phone, ready to call my supervisor, when I saw something that made my blood run cold. The chair I had just pushed in? It was pulled out again. By the third night, I was debating quitting, but my paycheck was good, and I wasn't about to lose a job over some weird noises. That night, I decided to set up my phone and record my rounds. just to prove to myself that nothing was happening. I walked past the silent slot machines, the empty blackjack tables, and the untouched bar. Everything seemed normal. Then, as I approached the high-stakes poker area, I heard it. Cards shuffling. I froze. The sound was unmistakable, like a dealer preparing for a hand. I raised my flashlight. The poker table ahead of me was empty, but the deck of cards was moving, being shuffled by invisible hands. I couldn't breathe. Then the cards dealt themselves, one by one, face down, as if an invisible dealer was setting up a game. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking as I started recording. The sound of a jackpot winning erupted from the far end of the casino. I turned, heart hammering in my chest. One of the slot machines was lit up. I know what you're thinking. Maybe the power had been restored. Maybe it was a malfunction. No. The entire casino was still dark, except for that one machine. The reels were spinning wildly, the lights flashing. Then, the payout. Coins spilled into the tray. But there were no coins, only the sound. A ghost jackpot. I bolted. I didn't care about my shift, my paycheck, nothing. I ran straight out the front doors and didn't stop until I reached my car. The next day, I told my supervisor everything. He didn't even look surprised. He just sighed, said, "Yeah, that place has history." I pressed him for details, but he wouldn't say much. All he told me was that before the casino shut down, there had been a dealer who worked the night shift. One night, after losing a huge bet, a gambler had accused the dealer of cheating. Things escalated. The gambler pulled a gun. By the time security arrived, the dealer was already dead, shot in the chest. The gambler. He pulled the trigger on himself right there at the table. Their last game never ended. The casino closed not long after. And now, they were still playing, still waiting for their final hand.